Good evening to all of you. We are starting today the webinar on From Policy to Practice, Building Stronger Governance and Control Frameworks. Uh, as we know that today we will be having a webinar. Mr. Shakhar Basu would be taking the session. We have with us our chairman, CMA Chittaranjan Chattopadhyay, sir. Before we start the session, we start with our auspicious note with our institute anthem. Let us play that. Now I will request our chairman, CMA Chittaranjan Chattopadhyay, the chairman of the FSI board, to give his welcome address. Sir, over to you, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir. You are not visible, sir.
Hello?
Yes, yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, audible, sir, but you have to
Okay.
open your
Thank you.
video, sir.
I think bandwidth is very less, I think, where I'm speaking. I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
want to put my mic, my video off. Anyhow, so very good afternoon to all the participants here today in the webinar on From Policy to Practice, Building Stronger Governance and Control Frameworks. Our today's speaker, Sri Sakshat Basu, who is the FCFA Australia, RIMS CRMP fellows, and he's a very young professional in the risk management practice from Australia. He has been kind enough to be with us. He is continuously disseminating his knowledge, domain area knowledge to our CMS, my fellow CMS and participants. I welcome you with my warm heart for this webinar. We convene at a moment when policy ambition and market complexity demand stronger translations of rule books into reliable practice. India's macro foundation is robust, growth momentum is intact, and headline banking metrics show resilience. Systematic capital buffers are high, and headline GNPA is at multi-decadal lows. If you interpret it in numerics way, then GNPA is minus 2.3% as of March 2025. Yet regulators and practitioners are rightly vigilant about latent operational, cyber, and conduct risks. Two realities define today's governance frontier. First, regulatory expectations have widened beyond balance sheet prudence to include board accountability, IT and data governance, third-party risk, and transparent product governance. Secondly, digital amplifications has converted operational weakness into system-wide vulnerabilities. Cyber incidents and phishing surged sharply in recent periods. India recorded over 135,000 financial sector phishing attempts in half-yearly 1 2024, as we have got the report from our available sources. And the cost of data breaches in India reached record levels. Average breach cost INR 195 million in 2024. These facts reframe governance. Technical controls without governance are brittle. What most practice changes look like? I think 3 coin size. I can say that first is your. If we talk about this, then we have to understand that 3 coin size interlocking chips will be governance-led assurance, elevate operational KPIs, mean time to detect, mean time to recover, third-party concentration indices and digital runoff sensitivity into routine board dashboards. Boards must own these matrices as they do capital ratios. Then modernizations, another aspect, adopt zero trust architectures, real-time monitoring, rigorous change and release control APIs, and enforce vendor redundancy and recovery SLS, integrate continuous control testing, automated checks that convert controls and evidence. Third is your assurance transformations, shift from periodic audits to continuous assurance, automated transaction testing, on-demand forensics, and coin size. CMA certificate for reserves, controls, and product governance. CMS must blend accounting rigor, data analytics, and forensic readiness to produce regulator acceptable evidence. With this end in view, we are organizing this program with the help of our Mr. Sakshar Basu, who is a very young risk management practicing and is having a lot of case studies with him. Practical issues we must tackle now. Legacy data silos that impact model validations, talent gain, cyber forensics, and cloud risk, and inconsistent board engagement on operational risk. Our remedies are straightforward. Data lineage initiatives, targeted upskilling, and board education coupled with regulator aligned books. ICMA's BFSIB is actively supporting transitions through targeted short-term courses, regulator practitioner toolkit notes that operationalize RO 2020, SEBI CSCRF, extensions on RBI supervisory practice. Our aim is simple: make regulation practicable and audits actionable, so institutions convert compliances into competitive resilience. Policy sets the direction, as you know. Practice secures the destination. Let us use today's dialogue with Sakshar Basu, sharpen governance playbooks, adopt control architectures that are auditable and resilient, and ensure that our assurance frameworks protect stakeholders while enabling responsible innovations. I invite Sri Sakshar Basu with warm heart to address practical frameworks and implementation of pathways. Thank you, and I'm very much grateful to my attendees, participants who are continuously supporting us for this sort of webinars, and we look forward for such more and more this type of webinars for enriching our CMAs for their future skilling, future upskilling, future reskilling. With this end in view, I also congratulate my team in a very small team, but small is always beautiful. My team is very beautiful. HOD and our research associate, CMA, both are CMA. They are relentlessly working. Entire effort, tireless effort is giving these sort of programs, and I am really thankful to them also. I again welcome Sri Sakshar Basu for his eloquent speech as he has given earlier. I welcome Mr. Basu. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Chairman, sir, for your wonderful opening remarks. And I welcome Sakshar Basu, sir, for today's session. I think some time differences is there. He is staying outside India, but still he has made his time today. Today is his third webinar with BFSI.
Yeah.
just to brief about Shankar Basu's profile. Sir is a vastly experienced risk and control leader with over 15 years of international experience spanning across enterprise risk management, internal controls, audit, and finance. Sir is currently working as a senior manager, group risk and compliance based in Singapore. In his current role, he oversees third party compliance, business continuity, and enterprise risk management. In his earlier role in Revantage Asia Pacific, he led the regional risk function, implemented risk policies, and conducted risk and control analysis across Australia, Singapore, and India to adequately address gaps and mitigate risk. Earlier, he served as a senior risk analyst in the Middle East for 8 years with a state-owned oil company where he established risk frameworks covering credit, operations, and financial risk, led discussions with risk committee to mitigate such threats. Sir is holding a FCPA Australia and is a certified risk management professional, a master degree in professional accounting with Dean's Honors, with a Bachelor of Commerce degree from St. Xavier's College, Kolkata. Outside work, Sir is a keen speaker and has a passion for speaking at webinars and other knowledge sharing forums. He is an avid learner and lives in Singapore with his family. With this introduction, I welcome heartily Shankar Basu sir. Over to you, sir.
Thanks for the kind introduction, CMA Dibyendu Roy, and I'm deeply obliged to have been given this opportunity to speak today. As respected CMA President Chairman said, that this is my third webinar with the ICMI chapter, so definitely extremely privileged to be given this opportunity to speak. And to all the participants today, my listeners, over the next hour and 15 minutes, we're going to discuss one of the most important topics today, from policy to practice, building stronger governance and control frameworks for sustainable business success, translating the governance policy into a practical tool that drives your business forward. Without further delay, let me share my screen first, and Dipindu, if you can just let me know once you see the screen. I will be sharing that. Hang on a minute. Okay, I'm going to put it on full PowerPoint mode so all of you can see that better. I'm audible, yeah?
Yes, you're audible, sir.
Okay. Okay, I'm hoping that you're able to see it wide and clear on the screens. It's on full PPT mode. Dipindu, you can see it loud, clearly, right? It's a big screen that I've
Yes.
Okay.
Very much.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Perfect. Okay, I've got lots to speak today. I've got to go through a lot of content. So let's kind of lots to unravel today. Let's unpack and deep dive. All right. So in terms of the learning outcomes, first we'll clearly define the essential learning outcomes. First, we clearly define the essential principles of effective governance, accountability, transparency, and alignment, and demonstrate how they are powerful drivers of accountability in organizational performance and not just regulatory compliance. Next, our second goal is to equip you with the knowledge of design and how to assess internal controls. This must be done using a risk-based approach, ensuring every control is strategic, efficient, and aligned with your unique business needs and strategic objectives. Finally, we will look at the real-world examples and analyze to help you recognize these early warning signs of weak governance controls or failures. And the goal is to give you a toolkit for proactive remediation so you can step in and fix structural issues before they mature into a crisis. All right, so our agenda for today. Our discussion is structured around these 7 key areas that you see on screen. We start with the philosophical foundations of governance, of good governance. We'll diagnose the common pain points, move into the practical design of controls, and conclude with case studies, critical case studies, and regulatory approaches in Asia. Just one other thing I wanted to highlight is Dibyendu, along the next few slides, I'll have 3 poll questions which I would post it on the chat or the Q&A. And if I can request you to just maneuver the controls around it in terms of getting responses, and we'll time it to about a minute so that we can stick to the time today. Thanks. Okay, so in terms of our foundations of good governance, right? So accountability. So in today's complex, fast-moving regulatory and market environment, the stakes have never been higher. Having a governance policy on a shelf is simply not enough, as you all know. The major corporate crisis we've all seen through the years highlight a critical gap. And what is that gap? The gap between the written policy and the practicality of it. That means the executed practice. So we are here to bridge that gap. Therefore, accountability is the bedrock. It's about having clear ownership of decision making, of outcomes and the risks. As you all know, board members and executives must actively take responsibility for organizational performance and critically for being good stewards of stakeholder interest. When a crisis hits, the first question is always, you know it, right? Who was responsible? Good governance answers that question beforehand. Clear documented ownership prevents the blame game and drives better decision making. As senior professionals, you all know that we want to avoid a situation like that in terms of blurred lines. So therefore, clarity in your ownership and roles are of paramount importance. Accountability is reinforced through performance metrics, reporting lines, and consequences for control breaches. Next, transparency requires more than just making documents available. It demands open communication, timely reporting, and accuracy to all stakeholders. It includes investors, regulators, employees, basically answerable to anyone and everyone. Transparency builds that trust that enables informed decision making and allows the market to accurately value your firm. In terms of openness, openness in financial reporting, risk disclosures, and decision making builds investor and public confidence, as we all know. For instance, transparent reporting of governance policies and performance, example through annual reports or corporate websites, signals a culture of integrity and reduces the risk of fraud. Now, governance cannot exist in a vacuum, separate from your business goals. Your controls and oversight mechanisms must directly support your strategy and it must be aligned perfectly with your stated risk appetite. If your controls slow down your core business, they're probably misaligned. So governance should be a strategic enabler that helps you take smart risks, not a bureaucratic blocker. And lastly, fairness. Fairness is acting in an ethical conduct and fair treatment of all stakeholders. Fairness requires that minority shareholders, employees, and other principals, for example, via a strong tone at the top, a robust code of conduct, whistleblowing policies, and board oversight of ethics. This reinforces trust and long-term value. Stakeholders are considered in board. Basically, you have to consider all stakeholders in your board decision making. Responsibility encompasses compliance with laws, ethical standards, and corporate values. So now we'll be briefly talking about some of the governance derailers and pain points that I've seen from one of the reports that I've recently come across. Let's deep dive a little bit on this. So McKinsey had done a 2020 in the McKinsey's 2025 global GRC benchmarking survey. What baffled me was to see that only 50% of boards lack a truly strategic focus. That is quite alarming. I mean, half the boards they lack a strategic focus. The other aspect of of this is, if you read the number, 50% of 50% of organizations, they lack governance, formal governance procedures, meaning policies are often not translated into action. And you know the popular saying that says very often, culture eats dash for breakfast. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, basically. The other pointer here is 44%. Now, I'm pretty sure as senior professionals sitting across from coming from various banking and other insurance and regulators and business professionals, 44%, the survey shows 44% of risk leadership are positioned more than one below the CEO level. What does it mean? It means it basically highlights your weakness in structural positioning for risk authority. That means you basically have lower visibility, and when the going gets tough, the risk managers are not there to be closely aligned with that decision making, or even in strategic, or even in restructuring decisions, right? That is the point I wanted to showcase to you guys. And dear viewers, if you see this one, you'll be quite surprised to see that the 68% of firms, of the number that is highlighted on your extreme right, 68% of firms rate their maturity for integrating ethics or compliance into leadership incentives and bonus structures as absent or lagging or needing improvement. We have seen this pattern repeatedly in corporate scandals across the years, incentives being focused solely on short-term results. We have seen later. I'll show you some case studies, examples, real examples of case studies where you've seen aggressive sales targets, which are completely inadvertently there to encourage unethical behaviors, and that leads to circumvention of all kinds of protocols. I would leave you with this other number, which is a 42%. They say that some of these people who have been interviewed, they say that their GRC or their risk system, they need improvement. That's a large number. All right, let's move on to the next part, which is on the governance documentation. Now, in practice, governance is what? Governance is the system of rules, roles, and processes, right? And who is it led by? It's led by the board, executed by the management, and I would say audited by the third level, which is the internal audit department. Now that they together direct and control the organization. So your governance documentation needs to be clear and concise. They need to be regularly reviewed and updated for any changes. Even when governance, and one other factor that I wanted to show you here is this. Even if all this exists, the devil is in the details, right? Always. Results from McKinsey's 2025 GRC benchmarking survey, they shine a light on systemic issues. Many firms maintain formal documents, 93%, but almost close to half they lack formal governance procedures. That is a lot. That shows the level of immaturity in this space as far as governance or clear governance documentation is concerned. All right, this next slide is something which is unique to Singapore, and I wanted to just showcase that to you to have some exposure to this. So let me just maybe share this with you first, and then I'll explain this. So on your screen, you're seeing on the left-hand side is a chart, a graph showing the general business category, and on the right side is a REITs business. Now they have been done by the Singapore Governance and Transparency Index, the SGTI, in 2025. They always do this every year to get a scorecard and benchmark this against last year and seeing what are working well versus what needs improvement. They are rated across 5 different areas or criteria. As you can see, board responsibilities, rights of shareholder rights, the stakeholder management in terms of ESG plus other stakeholders, the audit part, and the disclosures. So in 2025, what it tells us, and this tells us where listed companies are actually succeeding and failing in your governance disclosures. So the findings on your screen, they clearly show Marginal improvement in scores in both categories on general business and REITs when compared to last year. The general business has scored 70.9 versus 69.3 in 2024 versus 2024. The REITs business has done a little better in terms of 90.2 against 86.6. So if you see closely, you can see strong performance in areas related to shareholder rights. But if you look at board responsibilities and disclosures and transparencies, those are the areas where you see the scores kind of dipping down and lagging. And that is coming out from the McKinsey governance derailer points as well. The companies need to be better at demonstrating this. Critically, the SGTI is proposing to add financial or value creation metrics. So the shift is already happening, such as, when I say value creation metrics, I mean dividends and stock returns from 2026 onwards. So the shift is the market is now focused on not just what you disclose, but what results your governance delivers. So good governance must deliver value, not just report on it. Essentially, what is trying to showcase what is the impact that you're driving to create that value. That is where this whole the future disclosures are going toward. It's not just about a metric that I want to report on. And you must have heard the term greenwashing a lot, which is basically all this most of these, because of the ESG driven layers of governance, a lot of the corporates have been doing or reporting metrics which are obviously clearly not a true and fair picture. And therefore, the word greenwashing comes in, where you need to report not just the numbers, but you need to show what kind of value it drives in your company and what impact it has made to the society. And more on that later. Okay, so let's move on. Some of the warning signs I wanted to showcase from a board level perspective. So as senior professionals, we need to be mindful of these warning signs. The first one I see is I've written is board complacency. So when you suddenly see directors becoming disengaged when results are not good enough, watch quietly and bad habits take root. Conversely, if you have a domineering CEO or chair who is not ready to listen to your point of view, I think we've got an issue on our hand. So a domineering CEO can definitely suppress a healthy debate. So we definitely kind of look out for those signals. Yeah, we talk about the rest of it is basically poor data quality, lack of reliable information for timely and fact-based decision making. You need information, you need data today, and it is no good if you are providing the data. If the data is delayed, your decision has already been made, so it doesn't really matter anymore. So therefore, the data is quite critical to the point that it needs to be received. Okay, in terms of management level issues, you'll find here some of the known devils. Quickly going to run through this, not really one by one, but in terms of as you can read through quickly, then I can explain. But basically what this is trying to say is some of the key points are lax segregation of duties. If you have weak whistleblower reporting mechanisms are not working, a lot of reliance on manual processes, those are problem areas, those are bad habits. You need to watch out for those. You need to escalate very, very quickly on those points. In terms of organization barriers, again, I'm going to run this very quickly. Employees, sometimes when you have a culture where employees they fear retaliation for raising concerns, it's a very poor culture. I mean, as risk managers, as governance, as people who are responsible, if you're in this audience, if you're responsible as a decision maker, you need to be mindful of these things. If you do sense that there's a poor culture where employees are fearful of, if they raise concerns, what will happen to them, if they might be implicated on this, if you have the power to change it, and if you don't know that exists, I strongly encourage the audience here who are senior professionals to actually do an engagement survey, and you will hopefully know that, or just keep your ears and eyes open. I'm sure you will, your business unit heads would flag some of this information out. If not, just walk the floor, talk to your people, your managers, and below, and you will kind of get a sense check on if that culture exists. If it is, then you've got a problem on hand. You need to change that. Silos. I think if a lot of the large corporates that we see across the globe, if you're working in silos within the functions and tools, it is a problem, but sometimes I know it is unavoidable because of the nature of the way sensitivity around it. I understand that if you're a large group and you're actually working across a lot of conglomerates and subsidiaries are spread across, that culture might set in, but try and avoid that culture as much as you can to bring in a sense of collaboration. So these are some of the warning signals I have seen in pretty much throughout my experience. Okay, I'm going to have a poll question here, and what I'll do is, for the interest of time, I'm going to go through this and I'm going to write this out in the Q&A. So I want some quick answers in terms of what do you believe is the most significant challenge in clearly distinguishing between the board's oversight role and the management's day-to-day execution responsibilities. The options are on your screen. So a board gets involved operationally in blurred lines of roles and responsibilities. Number 2 is lack of clear role definitions and governance framework. Management not providing transparent and timely information to board. And or number 4, insufficient board expertise in the business. If I can please request Dipendu, if you can help me with this in terms of people hopefully are able to just post it on the Q&A, what options they feel are the right options. That'll be great. Let's time it for a minute so we can move ahead. Dipendu, should I put it on like chat or Q&A? Is it on Q&A, I'm assuming, yeah?
Yeah, Q&A, you put it, they will give the options.
Okay. I mean, you can see the screen already, all of you. Just post me the answer, what you think is the one, and that will do. So I repeat the question, what do you believe is the most significant challenge in clearly distinguishing between the board's oversight role and the management's day-to-day execution responsibilities? Options are board gets involved operationally and blurred lines of roles responsibilities, or is it lack of clear role definitions and governance framework? Management is not providing transparent and timely information to the board, or is it insufficient board expertise in the business? Some quick answers that would be helpful. I'm not seeing any answers yet. Just give me a 1, 2, 3, and 4. Which one do you think is? I hope people on the call are able to publish their answers. I hope so. Number 2, okay.
Yes, responded, sir.
Yeah. Thanks. A few more responses, please. That'll be amazing. Yes. Just type in your thoughts, and that would be amazing. A few more responses, please. We got a 2. I can see a 2, and a 4, and an option 2 again. We spend about another 15 to 20 seconds and see if anyone has any other thoughts. Okay, before I close it out, any last answers that anyone wants to post it anonymously? Okay, a lot of 2s I can see. Fine, let's someone's written sorry, I think someone's written their membership number. May I request you to just give me the answer for some of them if you're writing if you're kind of just typing it out. If not, I would proceed. Okay, let's proceed. I would appreciate if in the next poll we can have a few more answers. So I went with my choice. My challenge was more on the board. Sometimes that's the first option, which is basically board gets operationally too much involved, and that's because they don't really know where the lines are, how much to get involved in terms of execution versus actually managing it. So lack of clear roles and responsibilities, definitely definitions and governance frameworks could also pose a challenge. So answers would have been fairly between these two, but I went with my answer was on the first one, but that's okay. That's fine. All right, let's move on. In terms of board, so I wanted to touch upon the responsibility, the differences between. This is a good segue into this part of the content of our agenda. So board versus management role, oversight versus execution, right? So board's role is strategic oversight, setting the risk appetite, approving the strategy. We all know this, the monitoring the performance, ensuring accountability, etc. Right? Senior management role is responsible for day-to-day execution, right? Designing the process, implementing controls, and reporting on the performance. How are we doing? A major point of friction is the confusion over the roles. Now, let me share this stat with you, and you'll be surprised again to see this. So in the 2023 Harvard PwC Board Effectiveness Survey, 40% of executives feel boards don't fully understand their role definition or role distinction, which is quite a large number, isn't it? So clear delineation of these roles, absolutely critical. Management's job, as you know, is to manage, whereas the board must govern and challenge the business. They should not run it, which is why I chose in the previous option, I chose number one, because I thought that sometimes can get a little like polluted. You don't really know where the lines are going. So which is why I chose that. So effective oversight relies upon maintaining clear lines of responsibility between the board and the management. Okay, let's look at something which is quite, you probably will be very familiar with this. So this is the latest COSO standard. They have actually moved from the three lines of defense to a 3 level, right? So instead of second line, third line, this is a bit, the approach has changed from instead of defining lines, the COSO framework has now gone into levels. First level, second level, and third, so that the lines of defense were getting a little blurred. That's why. Now, in terms of, oops, sorry, jumped it. So in terms of you're all familiar with these 3 lines. The first line, managers own or control the risk. Second line, as you know, which is us largely here, but myself, I represent the second line function, which is monitoring pretty much the first line's adherence to policies and controls, etc. And the third line, as you know, internal audit, they provide the independent assurance. So I want to reiterate that risk management is a governance issue. Boards must require management to integrate risk oversight into the strategy and periodically report on the risk exposures. The success of your framework rests heavily on the first line. Risk is managed most effectively by the people who create it. So remember, as risk managers, we are not the risk owners. The first line are always the risk owners. This requires empowering operational managers to be the frontline control owners and ensuring controls are practical and embedded seamlessly into your daily work routine. All right, let's move on something which is, again, we will move from the structure to the process using the COSO framework and the 5 pillars. What I've done is I've tried to represent this concept in a circular fashion here. The first one is control environment. It basically means you need to have a credible tone at the top, and the board is responsible for creating that. It is a function of clearly defining the roles, supporting all the controls and the risk framework, and etc. Next up is your risk assessment. So risk assessment is an area where you start identifying the risk through various methods like risk assessment. If you have attended one of my webinars earlier, this was a subject that I had touched upon in detail in how you do a comprehensive risk assessment, evaluation, and obviously the risk treatment. So I won't go again to get into the details for that. And then you're going to map each major risk to one or more controls using a risk control matrix. This is then followed by what we call is a control activity. This is where you have all your policies and procedures and SOPs stored in here. Next up is your communication, and lastly is followed by the monitoring, continuous monitoring. Okay, now we need to have a balance of different control types. What does that look like? Okay, it looks like this. You've got preventive controls. Preventive controls, as the definition says, that you need to stop them before they occur. So basically something like a segregation of duties, or even something like a bank reconciliation, something like a segregation of duties should stop the problem before they occur. Detective controls is something where you identify the issues after they have taken place. So something like a reconciliation. So you've had a reconciling error and you kind of look at it and then realize, okay, there are errors in it. So then you take preventive actions on that. And lastly, the corrective controls. This is like you need to it's like a remediation plan. You need to fix these identified problems or the errors that you've encountered and you have already discovered, and therefore you need to have a remediation plan around it. That is corrective controls. The other word for that is also mitigating controls. Okay, now this is something which I'm going to touch upon in terms of how you do a risk-based control design, which is a part of one of the webinar agenda points today. So a risk-based approach should be followed. First, this requires clearly defining your risk universe and your board approved risk appetite. You can't do this on your own. You definitely need to have your board support on this. They need to define what their risk thresholds are. Therefore, that defines or determines what the appetite is. Once you've done that, then you start mapping out your risks, and therefore your risk universe. You know what different risk factors are there, what key risk drivers are there, and that basically encompasses and forms the risk universe. Then, like I said, basically I said this point just now, map controls, and you then go towards performing a regular risk assessment. For each major risk, you assess the likelihood and the impact. You will use the risk assessment output to allocate the controls. Example of that would be a high probability fraud risk would warrant a strong segregation of duties and monitoring. The risk control matrix comes into play here, which I'm going to share now. I'm going to share a little bit of sample of a risk control matrix and what that looks like. Okay, let's look at one of them. The first one is like an unauthorized payment. So it is a method that ties each high risk area to its controls and shows where the gaps are. Once you've designed this controls, you have to test your controls to determine whether it's operating effectiveness. To determine its operating effectiveness, and is it being performed consistently. Independent testing and continuous monitoring are essential to prevent the control fatigue and ensure continued relevance. So let's look at this risk, which is unauthorized payment. One of the controls is that for that you need to prevent an unauthorized payment, you need to have a dual approval requirement. Now, what type of a control is this? In your minds, you might be thinking, what is it? If you have thought preventive, then you were right. Because you're trying to prevent a problem or a risk from happening. Therefore, by having a dual control, dual signatory, you're mitigating that risk from happening to a very large extent, unless the two dual signatories are acting in collusion. But that's an outlier. So therefore, this is a preventive control. And the frequency of this, because of payments, we make payments almost every day in organizations. So therefore, it's daily, if not definitely weekly. It could be weekly. Let's look at fraudulent risks. What do you think is the control? So the control could be, to prevent it, you need to have a bank reconciliation. How do you otherwise reconcile your balances being shown in your bank statements against your own ledgers? So this is the detective control. You need to always tie your bank ledger, your cash book with your bank statement. So therefore, it's a detective and usually done monthly. Okay, now if you have a data loss, if the risk is data loss, right? If you have a huge compromised data leakage, or you've got a risk of data loss, the control that we need to have is backups. So either you back up every 1 hour or 2 hours or 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, depending on the criticality of it, but you need to have that point. So therefore it's a corrective, and therefore it's a daily, it should be done daily, if not hourly. A regulatory breach, compliance monitoring, or again, this is a detective. It's very hard to prevent a regulatory breach from happening. You will usually get to know this from after the incident has happened or you've breached one of the regulatory compliance provisions, and therefore it's a detective one. But once you know it, you act on it to make sure that those are vetted properly in the future. Again, to do these things, guys, you need to collaborate with your first line functions and third line as well to have an integrated approach to risk management and review the risk register. If you're wondering what is RCM, I just wanted to tell you very quickly. RCM is a documentation. It's a testing tool. It maps specific risks and controls and shows how these controls are tested. It ensures that no critical risks are left out or go unaddressed, and provides a documentation of coverage. It's a living document, so please remember to update that and don't just look at it once in a year. It doesn't meet the purpose. It doesn't solve the purpose rather. So trust, but you trust the control that you're hearing from your first lines, but please verify. That's the mantra. If you can't test it, it is not a control, it's a hope. Right, let's move on. So that's what I meant by that. Okay, another poll question, very quickly. This time we're going to maybe spend about less than a minute. What do you think is the most common reason internal controls fail in your organizations? Over-reliance on automated controls without periodic validation, lack of management ownership and accountability, inadequate monitoring and testing of control effectiveness, or controls not keeping pace with changes in the business process. So what do you think is the most common reason internal controls are failing in your organization? Just quickly can type me type in the Q&A box. What do you think are the options? Let me check your answers if they're coming through thick and fast. Please request my viewers to put in your answers as you can, quickly as you can. Okay, I've got one answer, anonymous 3. Some more answers, please. So we can make this a little bit more interactive than just me talking. So I would think that whatever I said, either you've understood perfectly or absolutely not. Okay, just a few more answers. That'll be helpful. Okay, great. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I think spot on in terms of those who thought is number 3. Absolutely spot on. And I completely. I also thought the point. Those who've answered 1, I think in terms of what my thinking was, that it's probably closer to the option 3, because internal controls are failing because you're kind of not monitoring them on a frequent basis. Over-reliance on automated controls can happen, but that's not really a reason why the internal controls are failing. Automated controls, if you're over-relying on it, it's a good thing, isn't it? Sometimes because you're able to rely less on manual controls from that perspective. Okay, let's move on. So, okay, this one, I think you guys are going to love this. I have a Silicon Valley Bank case. If you have not heard of this ever, this is the first time you're hearing, I can assure you this is going to be a mind-blowing example of what you are going to discover. If you've heard it in the past or read it, I think it's still good to refresh your memories and see what really broke down in case you just read it on the papers. But I'm using this as an example to really point out the scandals and the governance failures that you can see clearly on broad daylight. Okay, let's look at what happened. Let me just put everything there first, and then we'll look at it. So we are looking currently at a real world failure. the Silicon Valley Bank's collapse, it offers a masterclass, like I said, in governance failure. SVB, as I call it, they failed due to a number of fundamental reasons for risk management. Let's review what happened first. So if you see this, so there was a rapid growth, in terms of the tech, some of the SMEs and technology startups deposits. There was a venture capital boom over there. It was invested heavily in long-term low-yield government bonds. So that means they're already there was an exposure to an interest rate risk. So the Feds had a hike. They had a rate hike, which led to a sharp bond devaluation. And obviously, whenever you have that kind of situation, it leads to large unrealized losses. Panic spread across the floor, led to massive customer withdrawals. You can see 42 billion were drawn. $42 billion were drawn in a single day. That for sale of devalued bonds at a significant loss to meet withdrawals, triggering this bank collapse. It just collapsed in a day. Okay, so what are the warning signals? Let's look at this. First point, the board oversight was weak. No matter which way you look at it, there was lack of risk management expertise, and you can see that my final bullet here, high turnover in key risk management positions. There was no chief risk officer for 8 months. That is a big red flag. You cannot be running a bank without having a risk officer or risk function for 8 months. That is just next level craziness. There was lack of transparency with sudden disclosures that triggered panic instead of reassuring the investors. You can see the bank failed to hedge their interest rate risk, the asset liability mismatch. There was hardly any liquidity stress tests done. So yeah, all of this combined led to this collapse. Now, what can we learn from this? So overall, let me just point out all the other bullets, and then you can see from there. Okay. So what do we learn from here? SVB's failure, due to the fundamental failure of risk management, they had high exposure to interest rate risk, critically suffered from insufficient board oversight, and went 8 months without a chief risk officer. They ignored their risk. They ignored their risk concentration, because that can be dangerous. You need to have diversified deposit bases. This shows that what functions, and they obviously the crucial importance of having a robust asset liability management, which is where reconciliation comes in, your matching principle comes in. That needs to be there, and strong risk governance is so critical for any organization. It's especially for a banking and the insurance sector, because of the amount of governance and the regulatory checks and balances that needs to be there, the reporting that needs to be in place. So this shows what happens when the risk function is structurally deprioritized. So I wanted to showcase this example as a warning flag. Okay, let's move on. I have one of the last 4 questions. In your view, what is the most common early warning signal of a governance failure? Weak tone at the top, over reliance on management's narrative, audit findings remain unresolved across multiple cycles, whistleblower complaints being ignored, and high turnover in key leadership roles. So a quick answer, in your view, what is the most common? If you're a risk manager or not a risk manager, if you're a senior professional who is in the business, what would you be concerned, and what would act as a common early warning signal for you for a governance failure? Quick answers, please, and then we can move to the remaining part of the other case study. Looking for answers. Let's see if we have any. I'm not sure why people are answering as B and D. Guys, I have this as numbers, so I'm not sure if you're. Okay, I've got somebody. CMA Om Prakash Batra has responded 3. Few more answers, please. That'd be great to have some quick throws. Okay, great. I'm getting it. 3 and 4, anonymous 3 and 4, 3. Okay, some more responses to see somebody thinks a little differently or not. I can see a 3 and 4. I can see a 3 and 4, 3. A few more answers. That'll be helpful. A lot of 3s and 3 and 4s. I'll give you guys about another few seconds, and if you can quickly pop in that for me. Okay, I think someone's. I assume, sir, Mr. Deepak Dhingra, assuming there's no C or D. I'm assuming you're saying 3 and 4. Okay, a lot of 3s, fine. Okay, let me go back to my screen. Just give me a minute. Okay. I think this question is such that there are no real sort of right answers, but my answer was 1 and a 5 for me when I think about it, but I'm pretty sure we have a diverse mind, so I would say that whistleblower complaints can also be definitely, if it's being ignored, that is an early warning signal. But if you're having audit findings unresolved, that's a big one as well. So literally saying yes, any of these options could be the ones, as long as these things are happening. If you're in your power to change it, please change it, because weak tone at the top and high turnover in leadership things are not really the best examples to have. Okay, let's look at the next one. I'm sure you heard the name Wells Fargo. Some of you probably have close relationship with this or have heard the names. Let's look at what happened. Okay, so okay, we will look at the governance failure a little later. The scandal first. So cross-selling became a central business strategy. Their CEO came up with this strategy where 8 is great. That means aiming for 8 products per customer. This strategy single-handedly led to aggressive sales targets and incentive structures, absolutely misaligned incentive structures. Employees began reporting unethical practices and pressures to meet unrealistic sales goals. But guess what? The whistleblower complaints were completely unheeded, ignored, or suppressed. In 2016, the scandal broke out publicly, and Wells Fargo was fined $185 million by regulators, ending with the CEO resigning. Further reviews uncover employees secretly creating $3.5 million unauthorized customer accounts and engaged in unethical practices in auto insurance and mortgage lending. The feds issued an unprecedented asset cap, restricting Wells Fargo's growth until governance and controls improve. This was in 2018. In 2020, Wells Fargo agreed to pay $3 billion in a settlement with the Department of Justice and the Securities Exchange Commission. What does this represent? It represents a classic example of a combined non-functional leadership's strategy leading to a cultural failure. So on the screen, I have mentioned some bullets over there in terms of governance and control failures. You can read on that, but most importantly, I'd like to focus on the lessons learned. So first point, let me put it all there first. So in terms of the lessons learned, toxic incentives drive misconduct. If not aligned with your ethics and customer interest, remember that. You always have to align your incentives with the right behavior. You have to promote that. Board oversight must go beyond numbers to challenge the culture and the practices. Regulatory sanctions can be structural, not just financial. Example of that would be the Fed's the asset cap, which I was mentioning earlier. Ignoring whistleblowers is one of the earliest red flags of governance failure, which some of the audience, some of my viewers have already explained, have already pointed that earlier. So remember one thing, remember culture is everything. Incentives must align with ethical behavior and whistleblower systems must be protected. Otherwise, how do you ensure employees having an inclusive culture and making employees feel that they're all secured. Everyone will be unsecured in that sense. So from that perspective, this two case studies I thought are some of the relevant examples to talk about, and showcase a little bit of give you a little bit of flavor on how corporate scandals can turn ugly and sometimes can lead to some serious punitive measures. Okay, so we will end this with, before we move on to the next segment of our webinar, I wanted to share with you some of the key takeaways that I want you to walk away with. Let's bring it all back to the core actions. To move from a policy to practice, you must start with foundations and establish clear roles, clear accountability, and transparency. Try and defining clear roles and responsibilities. It really makes everyone's lives simpler and easier to follow. Review board members' composition and diversity. Board members have diverse skills, risk, finance, technology, and that board committees, or audit, risk, remuneration, they have charters clarifying rules. Now, address your pain points. You learn from the failures. You perform the postmortems or on case studies or incidents that I just shared. Integrate these lessons learned into your policy and revise those policies. Embrace the new changes in do the change management well. Enhance your governance frameworks. Risk management, cannot emphasize more. Ensure risk management is effective and not just a tick in the box. You must conduct a comprehensive risk identification and make sure your controls are working effectively. As risk function as second line people, it is our utmost responsibility to make sure that we are closer to the strategy, we are closer to the board risk oversight committees and collaborate with them. Don't work in silos. Lastly, the monitoring part. So remember, for the ongoing assurance, use technology, use data analytics, analyze your data, analyze the risks that you see, continuously monitor that to spot the control failures and do it early rather than later. Remember one thing, governance is not just a one-time effort. It's an ongoing process. It is not a final destination, but like I said, it is a continuously improvement process. Okay, so with that, we are now going to be spending slightly different things in terms of sharing with you some of the governance, corporate governance disclosures. I'm moving away from what corporate governance pain points, derailers, case studies, lessons learned, to something which is a bit more towards the punitive measures, the disclosures that the regulators ask for, both in Singapore and India. Let's kick off. So yeah, let's kind of look at the next few slides, and I'll share this with you, a quick comparison of the two Asian countries between India and Singapore and what that looks like. Okay, let's compare this regulatory approaches. So this slide here captures the philosophical heart of comparison. India operates something we call is a highly prescriptive, it's a rule-based regime under the regulator SEBI. And with mandatory compliance, you must comply. That is what India's stance is. Singapore, on the other aspect, gives you a choice of either you comply or you explain. So it's a little bit more flexible approach. It's a bit of a principle-based approach, which allows for contextual adaptation. This means India focuses on the form of compliance, more stricter compliance, more stricter requirements, while Singapore focuses on the substance of it. So remember this point here, that it's mandatory compliance versus Singapore gives you a bit of a flexible principle-based approach, comply or explain. Now moving to the next slide. This slide can get a little busier on the eye, but I will run through the points to help you look through it. So I'm going to cite, what you're going to see is I'm going to cite some examples related to specific disclosure points on respective provisions on the Singapore Code of Corporate Governance in 2018. We'll start with director independence and their tenure. So in the tenure that you see generally in these provisions, the board independence, the committees that you see, there is a 9-year limit. Disclose the specific reasons why the board considers an independent director who has served for more than 9 years from the date of first appointment to still be independent. There are mandatory committees there, as you can see. There's the nomination and the remuneration committee. There's the audit committee, and they're all governed by the principles and the respective provisions. Principles 4, 5, and 6 of the code. They all disclose the composition, the key terms of reference, the summary of activities for the 3 mandatory committees that I just spoke about. Now, in terms of obviously, you need to have a diversity. I think I mentioned it already earlier that you need to have a board diversity from various from various diverse range and skills, so that people, you have a good representation of people from finance, technology, and the business. Okay, so let's talk about my favorite topic, my favorite disclosure area, risk management and internal controls. So the board statement, the annual report must include a mandatory statement from the board on the adequacy and the effectiveness of the internal controls. How are they operating? Is it operating effectively, or there are areas of improvement? And boards have to be very, very transparent on this, because ultimately, if you're a listed co, you are driving the share price, and you are driving your shareholders or stakeholders to take note of it and getting to believe that your controls are working fine, based on which more and more investments, more and more funds are coming your way, either through capital raising, or banks of funding, or external funding coming your way. So adequacy and effectiveness of controls, including financial, operational, compliance, and IT, and your risk management systems. The CEO and the CFO assurance. The CEO and the CFO assurance. What it means is that they have to disclose that the board has received assurance from the CEO and the CFO regarding the proper maintenance of financial records, true and fair view, as you all know, and the effectiveness of the risk management systems. Is it working effectively? In terms of the remuneration, individual director and CEO remuneration, the change is that the mandatory disclosures of the annual remuneration of each individual director and the CEO on a name basis. That's the change that we have seen. Specific dollar or percentage breakdown. Why does it matter? This is a key investor demand. Moving from the branded disclosure that used to happen earlier, which was more of a comply or explain, to full transparency. It has become effective for financial years commencing on or after the 1st Jan 2024. So this has become sort of a full governance, full transparency from a banded disclosure to a more full disclosure. The last point, I think, is more towards the transparency on the sustainability. Again, this has become pretty critical. Note that the climate-related disclosures are being phased in as a mandatory disclosure for all listed companies from this year onwards, from financial year 2025. This signals a growing area of non-financial governance disclosures in addition to the financials. Okay, let's see what that looks like for India. Okay, let's look at largely similar, but this has been driven by the SEBI. India's framework is largely driven by the SEBI on the listing obligations and disclosure requirements, the LODR. This is highly prescriptive, as I told you. So when we talk about governance here, we are largely talking about rules. The disclosure areas and requirements are generally similar in nature when I was comparing this, but let's look at some of them. So from the board committees, the board structure, everything is mandated, from the minimum number of independent directors to the committee's composition. There are regulations, specific regulations from SEBI, section 17 to 20, Schedule 5, Part C, etc. You can read those. Those are specifics in terms of what the applicable regulations. From a board diversity perspective, this is the change. I think India is leading in this. The mandate goes beyond gender. It requires a nomination and remuneration committee to formulate a comprehensive diversity policy. Mandatory inclusion of at least one woman director on the board. Next up, your related party transactions. This is a key topic. Related party transactions are treated with extreme caution, often requiring prior shareholder approval. Then in terms of remuneration practice, risk management, again, these are similar stuff that you would have seen. I wouldn't delve deeper into it, but the only other point I wanted to say was the BRSR, which is your business report and sustainability reporting, I think it's called. India is leading here. The business responsibility in the sustainability report is mandatory for the top 1,000 companies, they require specific auditable and quantitative metrics. So not just a narrative reporting. You can't do anymore. I don't know what kind of eye-washing the terminology here. I think it's called the greenwashing, basically. So you can't do that anymore. You need to have specific metrics auditable, and they have to be auditable. So be careful on what that looks like for your company, and if you report that. Okay. Here I have done a quick comparison between the two geographies. Some of it are based on the themes that you just saw. Let's target one by one. So in terms of the first is independent director tenure. India maintains a hard non-negotiable 10-year limit with a 3-year cooling off period. What does Singapore do? Singapore has this, like I was mentioning earlier, Singapore allows for a flexible extension where tenure exceeds 9 years with a 2-tier shareholder voting process. In terms of remuneration, let's look at that. Disclosure is typically banded on in aggregate for key management personnel, whereas for disclosure standards often lean towards named disclosures of full gender, full disclosure of director remuneration for greater transparency. So India issues great aggregate banding. Singapore requires named detailed individual disclosures. That's for all directors. That's the key differentiator. In terms of sustainability, as I just mentioned, India follows this BRSR for top 1,000 companies. Singapore lists comply or explain, but moving to emerging risk, I think the fact that Singapore mandates a sustainability report, but it allows more flexibility in how you report. Although high impact sectors are now required to adopt the TCFD, the climate task force based climate reporting. So they have mandated that for those high impact sectors to report on the climate risks. Yeah, so that's what I can think of. And in terms of related party transactions, like I said, they both require shareholder approval. I think there's not much of a difference between it. Both are very stringent. Singapore, on the other hand, applies a slightly more flexible approach, but the threshold and the specific rules differ. Singapore, the threshold-based system, they apply a more flexible approach of typically 5% of the net tangible assets. So those are the key differences. Now, due to the difference in the regulatory philosophy and the environment, what is the compliance reality looking like? India, with a prescriptive rule-based regime, results in a high volume of administrative penalties. 1 in 9 listed companies face annual fines for procedural lapses. So basically, these are administrative fines from the stock exchange, mainly your BSEs and NSEs. Most of these penalties are for procedural non-compliance, like I said, with missed deadlines, delayed submissions, gaps in the board compositions, etc., which are distinct from the serious violations which SEBI investigates. The strictness can sometimes overshadow the principles, forcing companies to focus more on meeting deadlines and ticking boxes rather than on the quality and the spirit of the governance. So that is something which we unfortunately can't change it, but we need to be mindful of paying less fines where we can, but sometimes it becomes a bit unavoidable due to the volume of it. Okay, understanding non-compliance tiers, expanding from the earlier slide, as mentioned that the penalties are typically for procedural non-compliance matters. In late 2023, a company was fined 4,65,000 rupees for non-compliance due to the lack of women directorship, which lasted for 93 days. So just imagine this. It's a procedural lapse, but that's how much fine you can expect. For serious violations, obviously it's a little bit more, a lot more punitive. Serious violations which governance failures and violations such as fraud, financial misstatements, insider trading, market manipulations. These are all mandated by the SEBI. SEBI will investigate these, and they have in place very steep penalties that include not only the director disqualification, but it could also imply criminal prosecution. So there was a case, there was a case that was reported in late 21 and 22. There was a fine totaling about 15 crores that was imposed on the directors of a major media company for fraudulent misstatements of accounts and illegal diversion of company funds. Okay, so a comparison of the director penalties between the two jurisdictions again. This is largely similar. A director in India faces the automatic 5-year disqualification from all companies if a single company they served on has failed to file returns within the prescribed period. This is very strict. This highlights the severity of the procedural compliance measures failures for India. Now, contrasting this with Singapore, disqualification also happens for 5 years, but for serious offenses or discretionary court order where willful misconduct, fraud, or unfit has been proven. That's a difference. In terms of monetary penalties, you can see India's framework actually exposes the directors to an enormous range of financial risk. The penalties range really high from a high volume continuous administrative admin fines to massive multi-crore fines almost up to 25 crore for serious frauds. Singapore has recently increased. Singapore had a fine of 5,000 before this. So they recently increased the fines from $5,000 to 12,000 for breach of fiduciary duties. For more severe market offenses like market misconduct, insider trading, an individual director can be fined not exceeding 250,000 Sing dollars, or an imprisonment for a term not exceeding 7 years, or both. For a corporation, this fine a corporation can be fined not exceeding $500,000. And lastly, in terms of administrative fines, they can range from, as you can see, they can range from 1,000 to 10,000 per day based on the delay. This makes a director's exposure to regulatory friction pretty high, I understand. But in Singapore, the ACRA offers composition fine settlements, typically starting from $500 per breach for common filing lapses. ACRA is the accounting regulatory authority of Singapore. And for late annual return filings, late fees can range from $300 to $600. The focus here is really on encouraging correction rather than immediate severe punishment. And I think this is the last of the key takeaways that you can walk away with. Take note of the differences in regulatory enforcement landscape. India has a very strict rule-based regime, mandatory regime. Singapore, on the other hand, has a comply or explain. Okay, some critical disclosure differences are there. Key distinctions are emerging in terms of independent directors. In India, there's a hard cap of 10-year limits for independent directors. Singapore allows flexible extensions provided you have a 2-tier shareholder voting process. In the last 2 points, India requires prior shareholder approval for all material related party transactions. Singapore applies, like I said earlier, 5% of net tangible assets. And lastly, you can see that the high volume of enforcement, the high rate of procedural fines in India, with approximately 1 in 9 listed companies facing annual fines, it highlights the enforcement pressure of mandatory regime. So we need to be careful of that. And lastly, I wanted to leave you with this 2 wonderful quotes. My favorite one is from Peter Drucker: "Culture is strategy for breakfast, but governance determines what culture you are allowed to thrive." With that, Thank you so much for listening to me patiently. I'm open to more questions now. I hope
you,
that
sir.
has been useful. Yeah.
Yeah, sir, the session was very much deviation from the last session which we had, which was more technical, and this was more focused on corporate governance. And you have given the comparative analysis between India and also Singapore, and also the best practices which all the corporates should undertake to make these control frameworks robust and much more effective one. And I thank wholeheartedly our speaker, Shakkar Basu, for sparing his time. I think few questions have come in the chat box, which we can browse.
Okay.
And since it was a very interactive session, many of the options, like your opinion poll, many of them participated. And I think still the fag end of the day, still 100 attendees, still they are attending the session, speaks volume of the effectiveness of today's session. And I request everybody to just check the recordings if they have missed any in the YouTube channel of our institute, so that you can rekindle the various aspects which our speaker has highlighted today in his speech. I think sir would be sharing his presentation also. We'll upload in our BFSI portal for many of the speakers, or the understanding the various aspects which may have missed during the presentation due to various issues. So with this, I think we don't have any further questions from the audience. I would request our another teammate of our BFSI department, CMA Roop Iswas, who is a dynamic person, since he has completed his CMA degree at very young age, with rank holding in both inter and final exams. And he is a very avid follower of our various sessions. And I request him to please give a formal vote of thanks to our faculty, and state what are your views as a closing remarks. Over to you, Roop.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, yes, audible.
It is my honor and privilege to give the vote of thanks for today's enlightening webinar. On behalf of the BFSI board of the Institute of Cost Accountants of India, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to our distinguished speaker, Sri Shakkar Basu, for sharing his valuable insight and practical perspectives on strengthening governance and control mechanisms. Your thoughts have provided great clarity on how organizations can bridge the gap between policy formulation and real-world implementation. I also express our sincere thanks to CMA Chittaranjan Chattopadhyay sir, Chairman of BFSI Board, for his continued guidance and leadership in organizing such meaningful knowledge sessions. Our appreciation also goes to all members, professionals, and participants who joined us today and contributed to making this session interactive and enriching. With this, we conclude today's session. Thank you once again, everyone, for your time and participation. Have a pleasant evening ahead. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. See you later. Good night. Good evening.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
We are
sir.
closing for today. Thank you all.
Thanks.